All right, so let's dive in here. So, how do we think about optimizing your financial life in 2024? Before we get into that, we're going to talk through just a couple agenda items. So, this is all about how to optimize your financial life in general, but specifically for 2024, what that looks like in Tiller, and then how to get your spreadsheet ready for 2024. So I'll go into a demo and kind of demonstrate all the tactical pieces of getting it ready for 2024 and exploring some different options for doing that. And then we'll have a Q&A portion towards the end of the session. You can use the Q&A button at any point during the session. Chris is going to be looking through those Q&A questions once we get into the demo part, and she'll try to answer some questions just over the Q&A tool as I'm demoing. So feel free to ask at any point. We'll take many of the questions at the end. When we have bigger groups like this, we don't usually get through all of the questions, but we will provide a link to some resources tomorrow, or we'll go through and export the questions and try to make sure that we answer any that we didn't get to answer in the session. And once again, you'll get an email tomorrow about this time of day that'll have a link to the recording of the session as well as the resources. All right, so let's kind of kick it off. So we have just a little bit of, sort of, we want to have a conversation about this. Like, what does this mean? Optimizing your financial life. I love doing this webinar every year, and I've done it with Krista for a few of the different years since we've both been at Tiller for a while. And we always try to pick just kind of like a different theme. And so this year, the theme is about optimizing your financial life. And we have this calendar at my house that I'm not like it has these really amazing inspirational quotes. Not a huge fan of it just because it's paper and I'm like very like earth conscious. But what's cool about it is that on the back side is like a little notepad. And so you can write notes on it after you've used it. So it's like multi-use, you can reuse it. And I thought that this quote from Monday of this week was perfect to kind of pull together like, what is this theme about optimizing your financial life? And Charles Kettering says, it's amazing what ordinary people can do if they set out without preconceived notions. And we're all just ordinary people. Like you can hear me and Krista talking about John Candy movies and like the weather or whatever. Like we're just ordinary people, and maybe we struggle with money. Maybe we don't. Maybe we came from, financial scarcity growing up. Maybe we didn't. Like we're just ordinary people. And so if we kind of set out without these preconceived notions, or we're willing to change our perspective, we can do some amazing things. So I thought this was just a great quote to kind of like pull together the theme of this session. And so as we kind of get into that and think about it, I also had this idea as I was like working on the content for this of what if we think about this as a flywheel? And so like this is a concept from Jim Collins that some of you may or may not have heard of. And it's something we've been exploring here at Tiller to help us just kind of ground in, like, where do we go next? Like, what do we build? What's going to best serve our business, as well as what's going to best serve our customers? And so we spent a lot of time thinking about this flywheel concept. And so I started thinking about that in the context of this webinar. And I'm like, what if we apply this to this idea of optimizing your financial life? And so I think the first thing here is just the way that I'm thinking about this is money is a tool. Like we use money to buy things, and that can help us achieve our goals. That can help us not achieve our goals. That can help us, serve others. That can help us serve our planet. It's just a tool. It's all about how we use it. And so as we think about, how we use it to achieve our goals or increase the success in our life, a big part of that is awareness. And so I think Krista has some ideas on the awareness piece of this.
Right. So awareness is one of the first questions that Tiller's going to help you answer. It comes from setting up your categories, setting up, getting your transactions categorized so that you can see what are my sources of income, what are the buckets that I want to use to think about when I'm organizing my spending, when I'm looking at what I've done in the past, and then establishing what I want to do in the future. So that's one part of the awareness. The second part being establishing a routine of checking in. A habit, maybe you're subscribing or opting in to our daily email update where you're seeing the transactions from the day before every day. Maybe you're opening the spreadsheet every week. So it's, those two pieces, setting up the structure inside your spreadsheet and then setting up the behavior side that goes along with that. That is going to bring that awareness. That is one of the huge benefits of using a tool like Tiller.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like even at the higher level of that, it's getting all that data in one place in the same format, which is really where Tiller shines.
Right.
And then I think like once you have that awareness, we kind of go into this next part of our flywheel here is that once we have that awareness, that's where we can start to see the change happen. And so the kind of change that we're talking about is like to optimize your financial life, to achieve your goals and succeed, like it's all about change and it's all about habits. And so, minimizing where you're spending, reviewing all that data gives you that awareness to know where you can make those shifts in your habits to minimize spending in certain areas. Just little things like skipping the coffee shop in the morning can help you minimize spending in certain discretionary areas, for example. I think too, just like having diligence, and so it's like that awareness builds on to help you make those shifts in your habits, but then it's really about like being diligent in those throughout the year in order to then go toward achieving your goals. And so that's what success looks like is like once you've made those shifts in your habits, then you can see that change that then can lead you to succeeding and achieving any goals that you set out, whether they're financial goals or just other goals in your life that money relates to, because it's a tool and we use it to help us achieve all types of goals. Once you kind of get into that, success phase of achieving those goals, it can help you, just increase the availability of the tool, the money, because you've got more money saved, you can keep building awareness, you can keep creating change, and then you can keep achieving your goals. So that's the whole idea of this flywheel is like it just turns itself. Maybe it's not a perfect one. I put it on the back of that note, that exact note that I showed you in that other slide just a little bit before this session, but it was rolling around in my mind. I'm like, this seems like a flywheel. So that's what I went with. So how do we think about this in Tiller? So in our demo sheet, before I dive into the demo and the mechanics of like how to get it set up, I just wanted to share a few things about like, this idea of optimizing your financial life and what that might look like in Tiller. And so I think the first thing is about goal setting. So Krista, do you want to talk a little bit more about setting goals?
Sure. So the new year is a great time to start with this because, everyone's got the clean slate mentally for 2024. So with Tiller, we like to think about it being a place to keep all of your goals. And so writing those down in your spreadsheet, whether or not they're specifically related um, directly to money or not. So Heather's examples there, read 20 books, not audiobooks, planting a vegetable garden, those things that are now going to be front and center in your mind when you're visiting your spreadsheet and helps provide a reminder of the big picture objectives that you have for 2024 so that then when you're tracking, monitoring, budgeting, your spending, those priorities are going to be top of mind.
Yeah, totally. And this is just like, I just created this sheet in here. I mean, you can add tabs or sheets to your spreadsheet, and I just kind of fancied it up with some colors and checkboxes and stuff, but it's a really simple way to just put your goals right where your other stuff is. So then you've got these goals in here, they're front and center. You can rearrange them. Let's say like every time I open my sheet, I want to see those first, just so they're always there. How do then the rest of the pieces of Tiller in the foundation template, like how does that support you achieving those goals and optimizing your financial life? And I think the biggest piece is the categories. And so this might mean, if you've been with Tiller for a while, maybe it means restructuring your categories and simplifying them a little bit. Maybe you've got some duplicative categories, like, I've got a travel category and I've also got a vacation category. Why do I need both? So just kind of taking a very close look at those categories and deciding how are these going to support my goals? Are they too granular? Are they granular enough? Maybe like, I've got this yard and gardens in my hobbies. So I'm going to see effort toward that goal reflected in my money because I'll see transactions and spending against the yard and gardens category here. I think another way to kind of do this is like adding some layering, adding additional granularity. It could be, adding a tags column. If I want to get even more granular, you can add tags to your transaction sheet. I can say, you know, Earth Love, for example, just like making something up, like this is the kind of thing you can add to make it more granular and like deeper dive to see how your money is serving your goals. And then the last thing is potentially, understanding if your spending is aligning with your values. And so I added this aligned column, and then I added this values dashboard, which is available in the community, and I can kind of make sure that that's in the resource. And so it'll give you a breakdown of how your spending aligned or did not align with your values in the current month, as well as in a custom date range. So that's just another way to think about how your money might serve you in those goals and how to optimize your financial life for that. So let's talk about some workflows that maybe help with those categories. I think one of the big ones is AutoCAD. Do you have some ideas to share on that one?
I have lots of thoughts about AutoCAD, and it's because we hear from so many Tiller customers who say that AutoCAD is a complete game changer. If you've come from another tool, you might have been frustrated because that tool is choosing categories that aren't right for your expenses. And with AutoCAD, you have complete control, which for some at first glance, oh, that sounds a little intimidating, but really it can be as simple as saying, if a transaction has Trader Joe's in the description, it's going to go to groceries, or Harris Teeter in Heather's example. But it can get a lot more specific than that too. Say you write a check every week to your dog walker for $80. And the bank check description is not going to give you a whole lot of information about what that transaction is. But with AutoCAD, you can make sure that that $80 transaction gets automatically saved to your pet care category, or in this case, miscellaneous. But you have so much more granularity to write the rules that are going to categorize your transactions the way that makes sense for the way that you're thinking about your money. The other thing to mention is the suggested rules from the last 90 days. When you're looking at your past data, if you just want a quick place to start, that's kind of a easy cheat code to get some examples from AutoCAD's history of your past 90 days transactions. And it looks like Heather's opening that up right now, so we can kind of show you what that looks like.
It might not get much, just because, oh, it did. Just because that was what I used to generate all these. So I was
okay.
like, this is a quick way.
Well, yeah, so there's the cheat code. But yeah, so that'll give you at least a starting point with AutoCAD. If you haven't set up AutoCAD before, it's an easy way, low lift way to get started. And then as you dig in more, you can set more granular rules.
Yeah, for sure. I love that feature. Just, thinking about that idea of the dog walker, and this kind of gets to what you were talking about, the power of using Tiller and being able to control your categories. Like I just put it into MISC because I don't have a pet category, but that may be an area where, I want to track more granularly. And so I can say pets, and that's like living, because pets are not discretionary. You have to take care of them. Maybe like their toys or something are discretionary. And then I can really go and customize my experience with my money and optimize it for my financial life simply by, modifying those categories to make sense for me. So my data validation rule is not set up the right way there. Thanks for those tips about AutoCAD, Krista. I think the reverse of that is getting more hands-on with your money. And so this is something I like to recommend to folks who they have, an overspending problem. They're spending too much in certain categories. Actually going through and manually categorizing your transactions. If you have the time and you can take the time and you're trying to cut spending in certain areas, this is the best way to shift that habit, to be in that like change perspective, because you're going to sort of build awareness by having to touch each transaction, which then leads to that change of kind of being like, when you're at the store, you're online or you're in the Amazon app, like it, for me, created this mental pause of like, I know I'm going to see this transaction again. I'm going to have to categorize it because I'm committed to manually categorizing transactions. And it actually made me stop spending money, like when I didn't need to. So I highly recommend that. That's sort of like a reverse.
It's fully removing the blindfold.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's
You
like,
can't skip past it. Yeah.
Right.
There's a lot of chatter. I just wanted to mention, Heather, there's a lot of chat and a lot of webinar chat about Amazon specifically. Is there anything that you want to say about that, Amazon transactions?
Just like trying to get them the line item detail. Is that what you're
Yeah,
thinking?
that's
Yeah.
part of it. Yeah, the sort of headaches around that. And
Yeah. Yeah, we don't have a great solution for that. We have the community solution for Google Sheets specifically that can ingest whatever export you're able to get from Amazon right now, but it's not the easiest process, I will admit. And we don't have a great automated solution, but I hear you all.
yeah,
Um,
we do.
yeah, definitely hear you. Okay, and then I think like, the next sort of workflow and like, once you've kind of gotten into this idea of like, okay, I'm going to use this awareness to shift my habits to achieve my goals that then can turn into more money that can help me like, keep going around the flywheel. One of the biggest parts of the foundation template is just checking in on your monthly budget, and so the idea here is if you're kind of new to Tiller and maybe you're not fully set up, you probably want to take a look at the foundations webinar we've done in the past, and we will be running those for 6 weeks, starting in the first week of January. But the basics are that you can set your budget targets here on the category sheet. And then as you categorize your transactions, you can then use the monthly budget to check in on where you are throughout the month to understand how you're doing against those budget targets, which is a great way to check in on those goals. Are you overspending or underspending in those specific categories, and how are they aligning and supporting your goals? And so that's here on the monthly budget sheet. We can see in the available column how much is left. We can see in the actual column here how much we've actually spent on those particular categories. So use that as another workflow to just, once a week or once a month, periodically check in on your budget. And that can really help you kind of shift your thinking, make those changes to help you achieve those goals. And then the last thing I think is an interesting idea to help you sort of anchor in that change piece is having an accountability partner. Krista, I think this is something maybe you have some ideas on.
Yeah, so who is your accountability partner through this process? Is it partner, spouse, friend? Maybe you're finding some spreadsheet and personal finance fellowship in the Tiller community, but not keeping it all bottled up and making a commitment to yourself. Maybe it's easier with a partner to do those regular check-ins because that incremental change is really what's going to add up to the big shift at the end of the year. Um, the when I think about the Tiller customers who write in and they say, I've been using Tiller for a year now, the most impactful ones are the ones who say, and I do this every month, and now look at this giant, huge goal I've reached. I
Mhm.
was able to pay off this credit card that I really was so intimidated by. I feel in control of my money for the first time. Um, and the secret to that is even if it's just an accountability date with yourself, it's like
Mhm.
setting up that partner, that commitment that you're going to be in the sheet, um, doing the stuff, doing the work, getting the knowledge, making sure that you know what's going on with your money. Um, so yeah,
That's awesome. I love that. Accountability date with yourself. I never thought about it that way, but it's totally true.
it is
Okay,
true.
so let's get into the tactical part. So, how do we get this ready for 2024? So, if you're brand new to Tiller, you got the foundation template today or this week, then you're seeing here on your category sheet that all your budget months are starting with 2023 and it's almost 2024. So what's up with that? Well, news, we will be updating the budget to be for 2024 after this session. We kind of wanted to wait, do the session, and then we'll update it. But I think the biggest thing, no matter mostly for those that have been with us for a while, is to kind of think about how much history you need, especially as it relates to budgets. In this particular sheet, in the demo sheet here, and I'm just going to close out this AutoCAD sidebar here, I've got like a year's worth of data. So out of the box, when you get started with Tiller, we can pull in 30 to 90 days worth of transactions. That's going to depend on the financial institution. And so in this case, this is from the perspective of someone that's been with us maybe for a year, or maybe they spent the time of adding their data, their historical data that we weren't able to pull in. And we have some steps on how to do that. And I'll just, make sure that those are in the resources. But when you're thinking about getting ready for 2024 from a budgeting perspective, it's really not necessarily the history of your transactions and how much data is there. It's more about how much budget history you want in your category sheet, because this template can support more than 12 months of budgets. can support, I mean, I think in my personal sheet, I have probably 5 or 6 years of budget months in the sheet. And so it's really just depends on like, do you want to see all this history? Do you want to be able to, in your monthly budget, flip back to 2022 and, or 2023, let's say you're into 2024. Do you want to be able to flip back and look at your 2023 data? Do you want to be able to flip back and look at your past year's data from a budget perspective? So let's say that you want to just, you want to stick with the same categories, because that's the other consideration is like, are you going to redefine your category structure now that you've had time to kind of set some goals, think about how that's going to optimize your financial life or not? How are those categories going to support your goals? That's the other sort of decision to make too, is like, if you're going to stick with the same categories or make some very minor edits to your categories, then stay in the same spreadsheet by all means, and then decide how many budget years you want in the spreadsheet. If you're going to just kind of start fresh with your categories, you're going to make big sweeping changes to the category and group structure, for example, or maybe you just want to go to like this values aligned sort of spending paradigm, then that's probably appropriate to just start a new spreadsheet. And that's really easy to do. Let's say you just want to start fresh. That's very, very empowering because there's a lot of baggage around money sometimes, a lot of emotional baggage specifically. So if you're just looking for a fresh start, you can just totally go to the console here, my.tillerhq.com, start with Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel, and create a new spreadsheet and just kind of start fresh. If you've been with us for a while, when you use Tiller Money Feeds and fill the data in, you're going to get a bunch of historical years data, but you can just clear out all that history. You don't have to keep those historical transactions in there. You can just clear those out, start fresh for 2024. And that's actually a way that you can kind of start before 2024 starts. If you want to keep your budget history, or let's say let's start with you don't want to keep your budget history. You don't care to have all those extra budgets. The fastest thing to do, or maybe you just started this week or started today, the fastest way to get this ready for 2024 is to just change this from 2023 to 2024. And so when I make that change here in cell E1, it's going to update every subsequent month. So now I'm ready for 2024, and it was literally one character change that I made. But you'll notice that the budgets did not change or move around. So these are just completely static. These don't change when you change the year. So just keep that in mind. Let's say that I want to have the history. So I'm going to change this back to 2023. The steps to add additional budget years to this are really simple. I'm just going to select column E here. I'm going to hold the shift key, and then I'm going to select column P to select all 12 budget months. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to say insert 12 columns right. So now I've got 12 blank columns for my 2024 months. I'm going to select P1 here, which is December 2023, and you can see in the formula bar, this is just a formula, and I'm going to use this little circle here. Once I get the crosshairs, I can click and drag. This is what we call the fill handle, and I'm going to drag that formula across to the right, and then I've got my 12 months for 2024. To get the budgets over, I can just reuse the same budgets that I used for 2023 as a starting point for December. I'm scrolling all the way to the bottom. First, I've got this one selected. I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom. I'm going to hold the shift key and select the very bottom cell because I want to grab all these formulas and drag those over to the right. And those are just simple formulas that reference the previous cell, and that's just the way that we have it set up to quickly populate or cascade your budget values across to the right. Those are all just simple formulas. So now I've got my budget ready for 2024. And I can modify 2024 in January if needed. If anything needs to change, then I can modify that here in January 2024. So a good example might be, and I just want to kind of clear, I want to get these out of the way. So I'm going to select them, and then I'm going to right click. And you can either hide, or what I like to do is use this view more column actions at the bottom and then group them. So that way I can more easily, show and hide. So now I've still got those 2023 budget months in here, but I don't have to pay attention to them or look at them while I'm trying to think about 2024 and, optimizing my financial life. So one that might be different, I don't have it set up in here totally accurately, but like, where's my gifts? So like, it's the holiday season, I'm probably going to spend like $2,000 on gifts for my family. Well, I don't need it to be $2,000 in January. So I'm going to reset that for January to be like 50 bucks. Maybe, I have a $50 a month gift allowance to just shower my friends and loved ones with gifts, little small gifts each month. So you can see how I can easily change that for January of 2024. And then it updated across to the right. And I can always just reset any particular month. Maybe I know that, let's if I was a teacher, for example, and like the summer's coming and I need to reduce my budget in some areas through the summer because I'm not getting paid all summer or something like that. I can easily shift any budget for any particular month simply by overriding that simple formula in that cell. And then the subsequent month, I can update it if I need to be a different budget value to just overwrite that formula. So that's the basics of kind of setting up the budgets for 2024 here in that new column. So now I've got all that history. So if I look at the yearly budget, for example, I can now jump to 2024 and I can see my budget targets for 2024. I can flip back to 2023 if I want to look at my history of my budget versus my actual in 2023. So those are the few considerations with the categories if you're going to start fresh, if you want to add additional budget months. And then I'm just checking my notes here. Krista, anything to add? Or you're answering Q&A questions?
I'm answering Q&As.
Awesome.
But just a reminder to use the Q&A button at the bottom for your questions so we can make sure that if we can't get to them on the call, we'll be able to answer them in the webinar notes that'll go out tomorrow with the recording.
Yes, good reminder. That's probably why the chat was disabled initially, because sometimes folks get confused about where to put their question. So definitely get your question in that Q&A, use that Q&A button specifically. I think the other thing, if you did decide you wanted to adjust some categories, so for example, like I added this pets category, and I already kind of demoed like, updating the AutoCat rule, for example, where I have a check, the description contains check, and then the amount min and the amount max I set to 80, and that will basically equate to like amount equals 80. So I know that when that check gets cashed for 80 bucks, that it should be for pets. But what if I have transactions that I want to kind of clean up? So the way that you can do that, there's a couple ways. In the transaction sheet, you're allowed to make edits. The thing to just be aware of is not to change the name of the transaction sheet and not to change any of the header keywords in row 1 here. But you can add columns. Like you noticed, I added that tags column. I added this aligned column. You're free to make those edits. Just be aware when you try to make an edit that's going to affect row 1, it's going to give you like a heads up. Are you sure you want to do that kind of thing? And we're just protecting row 1 because of these headers. Like if you accidentally blow away the description header, your transactions are going to fill with no description because it doesn't know where to put the description. So you get this message. And so in this case, it's protecting me from, accidentally deleting that header. So I'm just going to click cancel because I didn't mean to do that. But if I want to turn on the filter, for example, or add a column, I'm going to get that same warning, but I actually know what I'm doing. I intend to do it. So I'll just say, okay. So I'm going to turn on a filter. I'm going to say don't show for 5 minutes because I don't want it to keep bugging me. And then I'll click OK. And then if I want to modify some of the transactions, like all the spending thus far for our dog, Aspen, has been just in the miscellaneous category. But as I'm optimizing my financial life, I want to give that more attention because I love our dog and she's aging. And I just want to make sure that she gets all the love and toys and grooming and everything that she needs. And so if I go through here, for example, like I know there's one like Rover transaction for a pet sitter, I can just, filter on the description, or I can filter on the category if I'm changing a specific category, and then I can change this to pets. I can't really, for the miscellaneous, I could filter on that, but I'd get a bunch of other stuff too. but I can try it. So we'll say misc, and we'll just look at the miscellaneous transactions, and then we can see if any of them, like this is for pets, because it's Petco. I could also add an AutoCAT rule. So that's the other thing to keep in mind when you're changing your transactions. You can use AutoCAT to help. And so, for example, if I put in Petco, and then I don't think I have that anywhere in here already, just double checking. Then I can choose pets, and then I can have AutoCAT help me clean these up. So I'm going to open it. And then the only thing I have to be aware of is because they're already categorized, AutoCAT by default only runs on uncategorized transactions. So I actually want to change this to all transactions. So it'll try to rerun it against existing transactions that are already categorized. So now when I click run, it should update a few of these. And I'm going to say yes, because I'm intending to run it against all. It can have some unintended consequences, so just keep that in mind. Let's see, did it get the other Petco? Yes, it got this one, and then it looks like it updated a couple others that I had created rules for Apple. So that's another way to help you kind of, restructure your categories as you're thinking about different ways you want to organize your categories. Let's see. And then the other thing too is, like, if you don't want to start a brand new sheet, but you want to kind of think about a different category structure, you can always hide categories you don't want to use anymore. So if I just use this hide from reports here, let's say this vacation category, it's kind of a duplicate of travel, or let's do the other one. Travel, it's kind of a duplicate of vacation. I can just say hide, and then it's going to hide it from my monthly budget, for example. And now I no longer see that travel category here, and it won't show me any of the data where transactions have been categorized with that particular category. All right, so I think those are the basics of everything I wanted to demo. So we're a little bit ahead of schedule on the demo, and we can go ahead and kick off the Q&A, because I'm sure there are plenty of questions there.
There are a lot of questions. So let's start with this one about account descriptions. It says your account descriptions are sensible, mine are gobbledygook. Can you
Mm.
show us how to neaten them up?
Sure. So that is a great tip for optimizing things, because a lot of these definitely were a lot of gobbledygook. I personally, like, in order to get ready for this demo, I just sorted by the description column, and then I just went through and like cleaned everything up. So when you sort, you get everything in alphabetical order, and then you can, let's say this was, it's like usually something not with any of those, like, but it looks like that or something, right? It's got some kind of like confirmation code in it or whatever. Like, I just then use the quick fill handle. Maybe it was like most of these looked like that or something. I just then use the quick fill handle to just pull it down and like simplify it. The other way that you can do it as an ongoing maintenance sort of thing is to use AutoCAT. So AutoCAT can do more than just categorize transactions for you. It can apply overrides to other columns as well. So it could apply tags. It could apply this like aligned, like if I'm really interested in using this to help me align my spending with my values, I could, for certain things that I know are always going to be aligned with my values, I could have it apply that for me, and I can have it clean up my descriptions. And so the way that you can do that is you can do it directly in the sheet by adding a column for the particular column in your transaction sheet that you're trying to override, or you can use the rule builder in the sidebar here. If you're using Excel, you'll have to do it manually by inserting the columns into the AutoCAT sheet, because we don't have the rule builder in the sidebar for Excel yet. But you'd want to turn on this advanced rule builder option. And then if the description contains, let's say it's Airbnb, it's not case sensitive, then I don't need to add another filter criteria. That's if I wanted to, put multiple descriptions together and kind of OR them together. Then I want to override the description column, and I want it to just be Airbnb to clean it up. And so I'm just going to create the rule first, and it's going to insert the column in the AutoCAT sheet for me as it's creating the rule, and apply the override. And I didn't apply a category in the rule, and that was just my mistake really, and I can go and I can apply a category, and we want to use like vacation, for example. Because it's already categorized, it's not going to clean those descriptions up. So once again, I have to do that thing where when I run it, I set it to all transactions. And then when I run AutoCAD, I should see it go and clean all of these up and remove that just extra text. And that's just making sure I know what I'm doing, and I do. So I'll just click OK. And then you notice that all those descriptions got cleaned up to be the more simplified version. So that was a great question. All right, what's up next?
Here's another AutoCAD question. If a description matches two AutoCAD entries, will the uppermost AutoCAD entry take precedence?
Yes, so it runs in a top-down order. So you want to put your more fine-grained rules at the top and your more broad rules at the bottom. And it won't execute on rules lower in the list if it's already matched on one.
Here's another question. If I copy 2023 data and establish 2024 with that copy, how do I quickly delete the 2023 transactions from the new 2024 sheet?
That's a great question. All right, so you're making a copy, right? So I'm going to say backup, make a copy. So what I would do is, I have this backup of the 2023 data, and it's got all the, 2023 transactions in it. At that point, I've got the archive, right? And so from my perspective, and Krista, stop me if I'm like getting this totally wrong from what they're asking, but at that point, I would just sort Z to A to make sure that the newest are at the top. And in this case, I only have 2023 data. But if I just select this top one, and then I'm on a Mac, but I think it's similar keyboard shortcuts. You can also just scroll all the way down, but if I do Shift Command and I press the down arrow, it's going to select all the rows in my sheet, and then I just hit the delete key, and then it just clears everything out. And so then I could just change the name to 2024 budget, and then I've got a clean slate for 2024. I can make sure that I just have these 2024 columns in here, for example. Does that feel like it fits what they're asking?
It does. So if you had 2024 transactions in there, you would just
Mhm.
need to make sure that the filter was only showing those 2023 transactions in the transaction sheet before you hit delete.
Yeah. Or just even selecting, like from
Right, right.
the most appropriate row.
So a related question is, can we copy the spreadsheet with categories for tracking expenses as well for 2024 while retaining 2023 for tax purposes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it would be a similar workflow. Like you would just basically make a backup of the 2023 sheet that's got all the 2023 data. You can refer back to that when you're doing your taxes, all the data's there. And then whatever sheet is linked to Tiller is the one that you continue using into 2024. You can clean the data out or not. It doesn't really
Yeah.
matter. Yeah.
So you're essentially just duplicating it as an archive copy
Yeah.
in your Google Drive, and it's not connected to the feed, so it's not
Yeah.
updating anymore.
Yeah. So you do that after you got all your, 2023 last of the year transactions.
If I wish to delete a few categories moving into the new year, but I wish to retain a history of previous categories, how would I do that?
Yeah, I think the best workflow for that is probably hiding the ones that you're not wanting to use, because if you delete them, I don't know if I actually have anything categorized as travel in here, but I can just kind of demonstrate. Like, let's say that this restaurant purchase was like I was traveling and I went to this restaurant. If I delete that category, like if I just totally delete that row, then what happens is you get this little red arrow that's like it's an error basically, because that category no longer exists. So this is just the data validation is complaining because it can't find that category. So you're going to end up with a bunch of these. So if you don't care about having a bunch of errors, then that you can totally delete it. Otherwise, like you can just hide it, and then we can see that on the monthly budget, I don't see the travel category there. If I unhide it, then I do see the travel category there. And I guess maybe that spending was in November, December? I don't know why it's not showing up.
I think Do you think another option, if you don't mind keeping it in a separate spreadsheet, would also just be creating an archive copy again of
Mhm.
2023 data just by duplicating the spreadsheet, saving it, then you have the
Mhm.
record of whatever your 2023 categories were, and then you're free to kind of change
Yeah,
for
definitely.
2024.
You can do that too. Good question,
Here's
though.
another question about categories. They want to have their categories ordered alphabetically, but they've added new categories at the
Mhm.
end. How
Mhm.
can they reorder the categories?
Yeah, so you can easily sort alphabetically your categories. You don't have to turn the filter on to do this. You can just use this little arrow at the top here in the column letter, and you can just say sort A to Z, and then it's going to sort them alphabetically for you here in the list. I like to sort them by group because I like to just kind of see like that specific breakout, but either way works. If you do end up using the filter to do that, just make sure you filter the entire sheet. You wouldn't want to just turn the filter on this one. This is sort of a common mistake because then if I sort, it's totally out of alignment with my groups and my
Yeah,
types and my budgets.
scrambled.
Yeah.
Um, Here's one on AutoCAD. For the new year, is there a way to transfer the rules from the previous year's Google Sheet if you're using a new sheet for 2024?
Yeah, so you can just copy paste. Let's say I think I have it here and I wanted to start fresh. I can create the new foundation template, the copy there. And then in my AutoCAD sheet here, I can just grab everything. I mean, I guess it depends on if you've added columns or not. So just be mindful of like if there are columns that are not default in the AutoCAD sheet when it gets installed, you would want to make sure that you add those. I think probably if you're starting fresh, the easiest way actually is just to use the copy to feature. So I can just grab the URL of this new sheet and copy it. And then if I just do a copy to by clicking that little arrow or right clicking the AutoCAD tab, I can say to existing spreadsheet. And then I'll paste that URL in of the sheet that I want to insert it into and then select it here and then choose insert. So now it tells me it's successfully copied. And then the last thing I need to do is just rename it just AutoCAD. And then Tiller Money Feeds will recognize that it's been inserted. Now you see, I'm seeing those errors here because I haven't moved over the categories or haven't updated the categories. So that's one thing. Like if you're wanting to start fresh with new categories, then you can just go and adjust them in the category, in the AutoCAD sheet here in the category column. If you're wanting to use the same categories, your best bet is probably just to make a copy of, the, sort of do that archiving process. Because you don't want to do the same copy to thing with the category sheet. It doesn't work the same way because there's a lot of sheets that are dependent on it being called categories, and it'll just be really messy to try to use that copy to feature. So hopefully that answers your question.
Next question was also AutoCAD. Is there a way to schedule it to run just like Phil Sheets does in Google Sheets?
Yeah. So yes, you can turn on the auto run on fill option. So in the extensions menu until our money feeds here, if we just go and open the AutoCAD sidebar, it's just a setting that you can enable and it will try to run your AutoCAD rules against transactions as they're being filled. So if I toggle this on, the next time new data is available to fill in, it'll run AutoCAD rules against the new data before it makes it into the spreadsheet. And if any of the transactions match any of the rules, they'll be categorized automatically when they make it into the sheet. That's a great question.
What are the pros and cons of making a new sheet every year instead of just adding the 2024 months? This person's current sheet has 2022 and 2023 already. Is there a point where you should not keep it in one single sheet?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a number of factors that are going to contribute to whether or not you should stay in the same sheet or make an archive and kind of clear out old historical data. The biggest two factors are the amount of accounts that you have connected or linked to that spreadsheet and the amount of complex dashboards that you may have in that spreadsheet. So for me, for example, I think I have like probably 6 accounts linked to my personal sheet, and I don't have anything too complicated. Like it's pretty vanilla as far as, came with what's in the foundation template. I didn't add a bunch of community solutions, maybe 1 or 2. And I have probably 5 or 6 years of data in there, and it's fine. I don't have any performance issues. What we start to see with a large data set, because you have like a lot of accounts, I would say probably 20 or more accounts combined with really complex dashboards, is the fill can sometimes stop working. And this is something that we do intend to address. It's kind of a combination of the way that we built the add-on and some limitations within Google Sheets itself, because the fill process basically shares a timer, a processing timer with the spreadsheet and the dashboards. And so like when you have 30 accounts and you're trying to fill all that data in, the spreadsheet starts recalculating. And if you have like a lot of complex calculations, they're just kind of bumping into each other, and it can cause the fill to stop. So 2 to 3 years, if you have like 20 plus accounts, you're probably fine. If you only have a few accounts and don't have a lot of complex dashboards, like just keep going. But if for some reason like you start to notice that it crashed, then we have steps on how to like remedy that. So hopefully that helps.
Here's a good question to follow on to that. This person started their sheet in March, and so now it's pulling the year data through February. They want to make the sheet January to December. What's the best way to do that?
Wait, can you restate that? Because it is
She's
January,
okay.
right?
This person started their spreadsheet in March,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's now pulling the year data through February. They want to make the year January to December.
Oh, so there's this like March. So it's like 3/1/2023. Okay. So then you see all these update, and then it's like starts. This is then like the next 12 columns. So in order to get it back on a January cycle, I mean, I think the easiest thing is probably just to add like, you could either just clear these 2 months out. That's probably what I would do, is just have these, it doesn't really matter too much because like it will just continue to accumulate the months. And so you could just do this. Like that's not gonna hurt anything. And if you're keeping the historical budgets in there and then you hide it, you just would want to change the grouping, if that makes sense. So that rather than like grouping through February, we just ungroup and then we just group through, these 9 months or whatever. A few more columns and then group. Yeah. So now when I look at it, I just see January through December. Hopefully that helps.
This other person wants to, they also started mid-year and they want to pull in the entire 2023 year to help create budgets. How would they manually pull in older data from before they started with Tiller?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have a great help article on this that goes through all the steps. The basics of it are that, you're gonna, and I can just kind of demo that. I'll just show you the help article, but I'm not gonna go through all the steps. Manually importing, how to manually import your bank data. So there are some community solutions that can help you automate that process. The one that I particularly like to use is the simple CSV import. It is more advanced. You do have to do some you have to paste in some code basically somewhere. But the steps are all detailed, really well written. But the basics of it, if you don't want to use any of the community automated solutions to help automate it, you're still going to have to export the data from your banks and from your accounts. And so that's always the first step. No matter if you decide to use any of these automated options or not, you're going to have to download a CSV or an Excel file from the bank. If you're using Google Sheets, you can upload it to your Google Drive to help you prepare the data, because you're going to have to reformat that data to make sure that it matches the transaction sheet columns. Sometimes you have weird stuff with amounts. There's some guidance in there on that. And then once you basically get it all formatted correctly so that you have the right columns in the right spaces or spaces for columns, when you're going to be pasting it in, you just paste it into the bottom of your transaction sheet. And then you can sort to make sure it's all in the right order. Some of the data that's like in these hidden columns, and a lot of these like are not really filled in all the way because this is just demo data. Like you pretty much don't need to worry about like month, week. You can add those if you want, but they're not really used by anything out of the box with Tiller. There's some help articles that are referenced in that guide that talk about how to backfill those as you're formatting the data. You don't have to worry about transaction ID, account ID, or any of this stuff really. It's mainly just these visible columns here that are the defaults. Like aligned is not a default, and the tags is not a default. So it's just the basic ones. Yes, those are the basic steps.
So another person is curious about the process if they want to switch from using Excel to moving over to Google Sheets this year. What is the process and how can they get their data over?
Yeah, so it's pretty much a copy paste. I mean, you are gonna want to, create whichever spreadsheet, get started in the foundation template, go through the steps of either installing the add-on or the add-in if you haven't already installed, fill the data in, and then just clear the data out of the new spreadsheet. So you're just trying to fill in whatever we have in order to basically let the add-on or the add-in know, like, okay, I filled data up to this point. Make sure the other sheet, whatever on the other platform, is also filled up to the same date. And then in the new spreadsheet, you just clear filled data because it's not going to have your categorizations. It's all just the raw data from our database. So once you've cleared that out, then you just can paste in the data from your other workbook. And it should map, like unless you've added custom columns or anything, like it should map pretty closely. But if you did, just make sure you add in those columns so that the space is there for them when you paste in, to make sure everything's pasted in the right columns. And that one's a little bit more simple because everything, the amounts are formatted correctly and so on and so forth. So great question.
Can you also demo how to split a transaction between a couple categories?
Yes, so that we have for Google Sheets. We don't have that feature for Excel just yet. So let's say this co-op purchase was, maybe some of it was gifts, which I think I actually intended for one of those to be gifts. But if I go into the Tiller Money Feeds add-on here near the bottom of the extensions menu, there's this tools option, which will allow me to quickly get to the split transaction. If I open the main sidebar, like if I click launch, it's also under tools and I can get to the split transaction. But this is usually the fastest, just while we're once again planning to rework the sidebar UI to make it faster. Definitely recommend using the menu options up here. So now I've got the original transaction, and let's say 50 of this was for gifts. So I'm going to change this amount in the top split first, and then I'm going to add the gifts category. And then when I click add split, it's automatically going to do the math for me for the remainder. And let's say like another $10 was like household stuff, like laundry detergent or something like that. And then I can add split, and it's going to add the remainder. And then I'll just say the rest of this was groceries. And then I can click split transaction, and then it's going to split that into 3 transactions, categorized as such, and then I'm off and running.
Would deleting old transactions by itself cause problems? And what about deleting past months in the categories tab? Can I do either without creating issues? Does it have to be in a specific order?
No specific order necessarily. Deleting past transactions, no. I mean, you can just delete. The cool thing about Google Sheets, like before you do anything that's kind of dramatic, if you're in Google Sheets, you can go to the version history here and you can just name the current version. So that way, if you do break something that's beyond repair, you can just revert back to that particular named version. If you're using Excel, if you have the workbook stored on your OneDrive, they do have some versioning capabilities. They're not quite as advanced as the Google Sheets version capabilities, and my experience have been a little bit buggy, but there is still some version control if you have your Excel workbook stored on OneDrive. So that would be the first thing I would do, and that'll give you some peace of mind because then you can just restore to the previous version. But it doesn't really matter. I mean, let's say I just want everything before August taken out. I can just select all these rows and I can just say delete, and then now I've got like a really clean sheet of just data through August. As far as categories go, I think was it about deleting
It was
budget
about the
months?
month. Yeah, about budget months on the category sheet.
Um, yeah, I think that's a good question because this one is not a formula. So that's the only thing to be careful of. And that's why we recommend either resetting the budget year starting here. Anything after column E, I think is fine to delete, but it's going to it's just going to pick up where, well, I guess no, that's a good test. You can't do that. I think, yeah, you probably have to just start sort of with column E and decide like what year or what month and year do you want your budget to start or history to start, I should say, if you're including multiple budget years. So that was a good question because I didn't realize that that would break things in such a bad way. Deleting to the right, I think is fine. Like I think I demoed that. Like I can delete these, it's fine. It's just deleting any in the middle, it probably just throws off the formulas that are relying on the previous cells, for example. So good question.
We have a lot of questions about feature parity between Google Sheets
Mm,
and Excel. What are the pros and cons of Google Sheets versus Excel? How many Tiller users
yeah.
are on Sheets versus Excel? What do you have to comment on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, so I would say by far most people are using Google Sheets, and that's predominantly just because we started with Google Sheets and it is more fully featured. Um, we are working to get Excel to parity. I don't have a timeline for when that will be. The whole sort of ecosystem of, Tiller and the different add-ons that we have for Google Sheet and the direction that those are going to be taking is it's a bit of a long journey to get to where our ideal is, which is having the Tiller Money Feeds add-on that has pretty much all of the capabilities of the Tiller Community Solutions add-on. If you're familiar with this, there's a bunch of additional templates that you can add into your foundation template to help just power up your awareness, for example. As you're thinking about optimizing your financial life, definitely explore these. But the long-term goal is that pretty much all of this stuff, with the exception of maybe some of the tools and utilities and things, are going to go into the Tiller Money Feeds add-on. The community solutions, like templates specifically that were built by community members, will still be supported by community members, but we just want to make them easier to find and easier to get them into your sheets. And so for Excel, like we're going to skip the community solutions separate extension thing. Like all that stuff will just go right into the add-in for Excel. It's just the timing of it. Like I can't give specific timing of like when that stuff will be available. And so some of it we try to do in parallel and like we'll make some progress with Excel, make some progress with Google Sheets and moving things over, but we have a lot to do and we're a pretty small team and we're doing our best to kind of get it all to be really cohesive. But if you want some of the, more fully featured things, definitely try out Google Sheets if you're open to it. You can always switch back to Excel later, like once things are closer to parity. So great
And all
question. I
that,
think
all that to
yeah,
say that Microsoft did officially recommend us as the replacement
yeah,
to Money in Excel when they sunset that solution. So even though we have a ways to go, like they had confidence in Tiller.
yeah,
So
for
we're on
sure.
our way.
That's a great point. All right, I think we got time for maybe one more question and then we'll call it a wrap at the top of the hour.
Yeah, let's see. Can you talk a little bit about whether Tiller is going to be making any updates in 2024 to data feeds and
Mm,
improving
mhm.
Yodlee and the account refresh
Yeah.
process, all of that?
Yeah, so that's sort of the big initiative that we've been working on all of this year, as well as going into next year, is just making sure that we have rock solid bank feeds, because that is the core of what we do. It's like getting that transaction balance data into your spreadsheets. And we want that to be the best experience possible. And there's more that we can do there. And so the biggest sort of thing that will be coming in 2024 is adding a second aggregator. It'll be in beta probably for a while. We haven't totally officially decided on who that second aggregator will be. If you're in our beta group in the Tiller community, you'll get news about that early in the year. And then once we feel like that's solid, we'll start working on, either shifting our default to be that new one, and then eventually allowing people to have feeds from multiple aggregators. But that's quite a ways out, just because it's a ton of work to do it really well and manage duplicates and make sure, we do it really, really well, so it's a great experience for everyone. But it is high on our priority list. We have so much to do, and like it's going to be an awesome year. I'm really excited about it, but we definitely are working to make the data feeds experience better. So great question. All right, awesome. Well, thanks so much for digging through all those questions, Krista, and thanks everybody for all your questions and all of your comments. And I hope you all have wonderful holidays. You can always reach us in support in the console via the chat or in the community. And wish y'all a very merry, happy holiday, new year. Hope that it all goes smoothly, getting everything ready. Thanks so much, Krista, for joining me on
Yeah.
this today.
And this recording will be in your inbox sometime
Yes.
tomorrow, along with some resources on the Q&A that we did not get to live. So we'll have answers.
All right. Thanks for that reminder, Krista. All right,
Yep.
y'all. Take care.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time. Bye, y'all.
Bye.